came to Nob to Amalek the priest, and Amalek came to meet David, trembling, and said to him, "Why are you alone and no one with you?" And David said to Amalek the priest, "The king has charged me with a matter, and said to me, 'Let no one know anything of the matter about which I send you, with which I have charged you. I have made an appointment with the young men for such and such a place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here." And the priest answered to David, "I have no common bread on hand, but there is holy bread. If the young men have kept themselves from women," and David answered the priest, "Truly women have been kept from us, as always when they go on expedition. The vessels of the young men are holy, even when it's an ordinary journey. How much more today will their vessels be holy?" So the priest gave him the holy bread, for there was no bread there but the bread of the presence, which is removed from before the Lord to be replaced by hot bread on the day it's taken away. Now a certain man of the servants of Saul was there that day, detained before the Lord, and his name was Dalton the Edomite, the chief of Saul's herdmen. Then David said to Amalek, Then have you not here a spear or a sword at hand? For I brought neither my sword nor my weapons with me, because the king's business required haste." And the priest said, "The sword of Goliath the Philistines, whom you struck down in the valley of Elah, behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you would take that, take it, for there is none but that here." And David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." And we're going to jump to chapter 22. I'll fill you in on what we skipped. But first, I just want to make you aware that as it's telling that story about David and the priest, it makes the one little verse side course to tell you that Dalton the Edomite was there. It's going to come up in chapter 22. We'll see how much of a bad thing that is. But right after that, David flees to Gath. It's actually the hometown of Goliath. You remember Goliath from the town of Gath? And he thought that he would just sneak in and not be noticed, but they began to sing the song. Saul struck down his thousands and David his 10,000. So David was worried that he was going to be seen as a threat in an enemy territory and be killed. So David does some pretty weird things. What he does is he acts like he's crazy. It says he begins to drool. He drooled all into his beard. He started mutilating the buildings and vandalizing things. So people thought that he had lost his mind, and you don't mess with somebody who lost their mind, right? And so David makes his escape, right? He scares them, and he gets out of there. They didn't want to mess with him as a madman. But then chapter 22, look at the first 2 verses. David runs from Gath. It says, "David departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brother and all his father's house heard it, they went down there to meet him. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul, gathered to him. He became a commander over them, and there with him about 400 men." Well, then David goes and he sets up a stronghold. Right? He goes into the forest. But then look down at verse 6. Now it switches scenes. Verse 6 begins to open up with Saul. It says this: "Now Saul heard that David was discovered, and the men who were with him, and Saul was sitting at Gibeah under the tamarisk tree on the height with his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. And Saul said to his servants who stood about him, 'Hear now, people of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards? Will he make you all commanders of thousands, commanders of hundreds, that all of you have conspired against me? No one discloses to me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is sorry for me or discloses to me that my son has stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait, as at this day.' And then answered Dalton the Edomite, who stood by the servants of Saul, 'I saw the son of Jesse come into Nob to eliminate the son of Ahitub, and he inquired of the Lord for him, and gave him provisions, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine.' Then king sent to summon Elimelech the priest, the son of Ahitub, and all his father's house, and the priests who were at Nob, and all of them came to the king. And Saul said, 'Hear now, my son of Ahitub.' And he answered, 'Here I am, my lord.' And Saul said to him, 'Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, in that you've given him bread and a sword and inquired of God for him, so that he's risen up against me to lie in wait, as at this day?'" Notice what's going on here. Saul is interrogating this priest, and the priest did nothing wrong. With verse 14, he begins to make his case. He says, "Then Elimelech answered the king, 'And who among all your servants is as faithful as David? Who is the king's son-in-law, and captain over your bodyguard, and honored in your house? Is today the first time that I've inquired of God for him? No. Let not the king impute anything to his servant, or to all the house of my father, for your servant has known nothing of all of this, much or little.' And the king said, 'You shall surely die, Elimelech, you and all your father's house.' And the king said to the guard who stood about him, 'Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because their hand also is with David.' And they knew that he fled and did not disclose it to me. But the servants of the king would not put out their hand to strike the priests of the Lord. Then the king said to Doeg, "You turn and strike the priest." And Doeg the Edomite turned and struck down the priest, and he killed on that day 85 persons who wore the linen ephod. And Nob, the city of the priests, he put to the sword. Both men and women, and child and infant, ox, donkey, and sheep, he put to the sword. But one of the sons of Abimelech, the son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped. He fled after David. And Abiathar told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. And David said to Abiathar, "I knew on that day when Doeg the Edomite was there that he would surely tell Saul, 'I have occasioned the death of all the persons of your father's house. Stay with me, do not be afraid, for he who seeks my life seeks yours. With me you shall be in safety.'" Let's pray. Father, as we get into your word, I pray that you speak it and through it. Guide our hearts and our ears towards your truth. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. What we're going to do is we're going to split this into two. We're not going to necessarily take it in chronological order. We're going to take the story apart. We're going to do a comparison. And we're going to see in David, we see the coming king, and in Saul, we see the prince of this world. And the first thing I want to see with David, the coming king, is this: relationship over religion. Relationship over religion. So let's tell this story again, and that way when I reference it throughout, you'll know exactly what we're talking about. David's fleeing. He runs to this priest. He's hungry. He's got some people with him, but he asks for bread of presents. The priest gives him bread, gives him a sword, and then he takes off. He goes to this cave. His family gets there with him. All these men come and gather with him that it says were destitute, discontented, in debt. Right? They all gather with him, about 400 people. And then Saul has his little time of insecurity. He hears about this conspiracy that he believes. He sends Doeg to get this priest. He trials him, gives him an unfair trial, kills him, and then kills everybody in that city. And then that priest flees to David. So you get kind of the big story going on here. The first thing we see, though, with David is relationship over religion. Now, where we get that? In those first 9 verses. See, when he runs up to the priest, and he says, "Do you have anything for me? I need 5 loaves of bread," or whatever you have here. And one thing about that is, the priest said, "I don't have any common bread here. All I have is holy bread, the bread of presence." Now, I know it's a stretch, so let me remind you, we went through the book of Hebrews last year, and in Hebrews, we talked a lot about the tabernacle. And in Hebrews, you have reference to the bread in the book. And the bread symbolized a lot of things that went along in their time of worship. But what was supposed to happen every day, or when the bread got bad, they were supposed to take the bread off, replace it with fresh baked loaves, and it was this offering before the Lord. It was a reminder that God had provided bread for them in the wilderness. It was a very holy thing, and it was only supposed to be eaten by the priest. And that was prescribed by the law. So that should make us stop and think for a minute. Shouldn't this priest know the law well enough not to give David bread he's not supposed to give him? And then on the flip side, shouldn't David know the law well enough to not accept that bread? But that ain't what happens. See, something very interesting happens here. Rather, David's hungry and he needs to eat. And the priest may not have kept the letter of the law, but he kept the spirit of the law. Those are two close, but not quite the same thing. It's a very important distinction. In fact, if you remember, this is exactly what's referenced by Jesus in the Gospel. You remember when Jesus was walking through the fields and he's picking, his disciples are picking heads of grain. And the Pharisees say, "You're not supposed to do that. It's the Sabbath. Don't you know you're not supposed to work on the Sabbath?" And Jesus responds and says, "When David was hungry, did he not go and eat from the bread of the presence?" He said, "So too, and these men who are hungry pick this grain." And then he makes the comment, "I am Lord of the Sabbath." The Sabbath was made not for men, not men for the Sabbath. Right? And so the whole point here is, yes, that might have been the law in its strictest sense, but this priest, doing, I think, what was right before God, kept the spirit of the law, to care for those that are hungry, to care for those that are in need. And he made a call and said, "You know what? I think God would be all right with me giving you this bread. You're clean, right? You're not doing anything unclean." David said, "No, we're clean. All of us are ritually clean. There's nothing keeping us from it." And he gives them the bread. And then, of course, he gives him a spear, and it says that he blessed him. But that's a key point right here, right? That he cared about relationship over religion. That this is something that pops up in the New Testament all the time. I don't know about you, but that's one of the things that I really hate about like big business. And you know what I'm talking about if you've ever went to like Walmart or Kohl's is the worst. You try to return something, and they always have some loophole for why you can't return it. Right? And so I remember I was at Kohl's one time, and I don't know if y'all knew this, but I wear a very small size of pants, and someone got me way too big of a size, right? And so I was like, I can't wear this. Actually, it was probably the opposite, right? I needed the Volkswagen size, and someone got me the Prius size, right? So anyway, I went and I said, I need to change these out. And what do? They say, well, we don't carry your size in store. Those are special order. So you have to go to that kiosk machine over there. And then I got to go over to that kiosk at Costco, and they said, well, that's the way it is. And I'm like, you don't understand. I have a pair of pants. I want the same pair of pants, a different size. And they look at you like, that'll be $15. No, right? That ain't how this works. But see, they have that kind of stuff. Anytime you've dealt with a business, or anytime a big business, or any chain, they don't really care, right? They just care about the bottom line, the money, the dollars. But that's one of the things also about small business, right? You can go and you can actually talk to somebody who actually owns the place. And they can know exactly maybe what you're going through, what you need, and they can help you in special ways, in particular ways. That's one of the biggest differences between big business and small business. And it's worth it sometimes, right? Even if it costs a little more, it's worth it to be able to talk to somebody. Because other people can talk person to person. You get something more authentic, something more genuine. That's what we have, y'all, when we approach the Scriptures. Now, I want to be careful here not to too far put God away from His law. The thing is, the law wasn't bad. We've said that all through the Old Testament. We said that in Hebrews. The law wasn't bad. The law was good. Paul loved the law. But he just said that Christ came and fulfilled the law, that you couldn't keep it, so He kept it for you. And so now he says, trying to put that burden on you as if you can keep it fully is just ignorant. You can't do it. Right? But it's still a good thing, so I don't want to break them apart. But when we approach the Scriptures, y'all, some of us see it as a law book. But when you approach the Scriptures and you come to God in faith, what you run into is not a dry law. You run into a living Lord. You run into one who knows exactly where you're at right now. You run into one who knows the exact feelings of your heart, who's been tempted and tried just as you are. You don't have somebody who opens a book that doesn't look at you and say, yep, you broke that one. No, you see one who says, He suffered and died for you. He cares for you. And He cares about a relationship over a dry religion. This is why it isn't just about rules, right? It's something bigger than that. David and his priests technically broke the rules, but they honored God. We are gracefully cared for and guided by the law, but by law alone. And we see that here coming with David as the coming king. Next, we see with David, I love this one, rejects welcome. Rejects welcome. He runs to this cave. And it says his family comes and joins him. Now that sounds really nice. It sounds like, well, look, his mom and daddy and all them finally come along and they like him. Probably not. They're probably scared of Saul. Your son's causing all this ruckus. You're probably not welcome in Saul's kingdom anymore, right? So they run and they join David and they need the protection. But I love what it says. It says that people who were destitute, in debt, and it says bitter in soul, which can also be translated discontented. And that's what some translations say. And, I mean, if you're Baptist, don't you just love 3 points that are alliterated with D's, right? And He did it for us in the Bible. No, I mean, it said, destitute, debt, and discontented. These people were on the fringes of society, and they were the ones who came and gathered around David. So basically, David has 400 rejects that he's leading. And y'all, we're some of those. And that's a good thing. I love it, right? Because these people around him were the opposite. And we think that, put that back to the New Testament. It's just like Jesus. Who did Jesus first come to, right? Who did the word about Jesus first come to? Shepherds. The rejects. They were the first to go see the baby. We don't really know this, but you know the reputation that Mary Magdalene has. One of Jesus' closest followers, one of the first to the grave. Some believe that she may have been a prostitute. We don't really know that for certain, but regardless, not that high standing in society. And she's with Jesus. Fishermen. We think about these apostles, these disciples that he had. Yeah, they seem like good guys as they're writing the Scriptures, but the reality is they're career fishermen. They probably did not have the best lives. They were probably far from holy. You had a Gentile, you had a doctor, you had a murderer. All these people were the people who gathered around Jesus. He attracted and he came to those that were destitute, in debt, and discontented. He said he came for the sick. Right? He didn't come for the healthy. The reality was there was nobody that was healthy. But the Pharisees had lied to themselves and said they were healthy. And he said, well, I didn't come for you then because you haven't truly accepted who you are. Who we are is broken. I shared this with the teenagers this morning. But hey, say all you want to about yourself. If you want to puff up your own worth in order to make yourself feel better, I guess you can. But here's the thing. I'm happy knowing that I was a reject who was saved by grace. I'm happy knowing that I did nothing to earn it, and not only did I do nothing to earn it, I don't deserve it. God saved me for no reason that I can think of other than He loved me when I was unlovable. He did something wholly on His own in loving me and made me worthy of grace even though I'm completely unworthy of it. The simple fact is this is the point we see with David, there's room at the cross for you. There's room at the cross for everyone. But finally with Him we see rescue and rest. At the very end of the story, after these horrible actions of Saul, the escaped priest makes his way to David, and he tells David what happened, and David rightfully feels hurt. You put yourself in David's shoes for just a minute and think about it. I'm sure, the Bible doesn't tell us much about it, but I'm sure David went through a bit of a depression with this. Because he said, when I was there that day, I seen Doug, and I knew he would go and tell Saul. I didn't know he'd react this badly. But he basically said, I'm responsible for all those people who been killed. I put you in danger. So you can imagine the guilt that he carried with him knowing he did that. But what does he say to the priest? He says, stick with me, and I'll give you rest and protection. I'll provide for you. You know, I mentioned it before, but we know that we've got brothers and sisters all across the world that are worshiping Him. Some in very different scenarios than us, and some in rough areas, persecuted areas. Places where death is not just something they talk about, but a very real possibility for following Jesus. And, as I said, we serve a living Savior, right? So this isn't some guy that's just not knowing or plugged in or not knowing what's going on. He's watching us. He's with us. He's here. He's present. And so you've got to know, as David points forward to Jesus, that when Jesus sees the pain in this world and He sees His sons and daughters that die for His name's sake, it still probably hurts the heart as He watches His people suffer. However, the only reason any of it is allowed to happen, and the only thing we can say in the midst of all of it, is the joy we know that when you come to Jesus, you find rescue and rest. And even those that are losing their lives for the faith still have rescue and rest. They have a hope that just transcends all the problems of this world. They have a hope that's greater than that, and it's only found in Him. The greater truth is that no matter what, in Him is rest and rescue. When we come to Jesus, the work is finished. With Him we have forgiveness, and we have a bill paid in full. David puts forward to the coming King. But then with Saul, as we look at the prince of this world, the first thing we see with him is irrational fears. Saul starts off with irrational fears. We jump to him, and he's judging under this tree with his spear in his hand. And you probably, if you followed a long way, you see what happened. But if you got lost, I'll just tell you, he starts to ask all these questions of all the people surrounding him. But these aren't just regular questions. He is thinking that everybody around him is plotting against him. He says, why didn't y'all tell me about David? Do you think that he's going to make you a commander of thousands or a commander of hundreds? Did David promise you land? Did David promise you riches? What all did David promise you to get you to listen to him? Not knowing that all those people sitting around Saul had no ill will against him. But Saul just begins to spiral. He's having all these irrational fears. He even goes as far to blame his son, Jonathan, for most of it. He says, Jonathan is the one that got David against me. I want all of them. He's just constantly fearful that people are talking about him, that they're plotting against him, that they're all against him. And so that's why he calls that priest there, right? He's asking for somebody to say what happened. And Doeg, that spy that was sitting there when David was there with the priest, says, I was there. And notice this too. Doeg the Edomite. This ain't even one of the children of Israel. This is a foreigner. and not a very good one, because Edom was not the place that you wanted to be from. And so Saul's using somebody who's not in the covenant, not part of their family. That's the one that he's got now as his spy. That's the one reason later that Doeg's going to be the one that kills the priest, because all the other guys ain't going to do it. That was a bad judgment, and that was an evil thing. And so he says, well, Edomite, you kill him. Happy to oblige, right? And so he gets Doeg, and he says, go get that priest for me. And he begins to grill that priest. Why? Because he has irrational fears. And that's one of the characteristics of the prince of this world, Satan. Right? This is saying it's against Christ. My mom was up visiting with me some this weekend. She went home yesterday, but I was talking with her, and we were talking about grandmas, and my grandma Fowler was grandma. My mama's mama was Nanny, right? That's what we call her, Nanny. And Nanny, I remember her babysitting me just a little bit. She died when I was younger, but I do know that most of what I remember from her was in a nursing home. Nanny ended up getting Alzheimer's, and we had to put her there, but my mama was there every day, right? Every day making sure they were taking care of her and all that. But she had one of those things that's very common for, I guess, people her age, especially in those situations, a UTI. And I did not know how serious that was until I saw my nanny say some things I ain't never heard my nanny say before. Right? I said, what in the world is she talking about? She'd get mean, right? She would lash out at her roommate. She would accuse the nurses of all kinds of stuff. So they were stealing from her or something, and she'd try to hit people, right? And I'm like, not my nanny. My nanny recorded Scooby-Doo on the VHS tape so I could watch it because I didn't have cable, right? That's what my nanny had those glasses that had the little guy that's, what is he? Speedy Gonzales, the little mouse, right? And all the Disney characters on glasses, you remember those? They had Lion King and all that. Oh yeah, she had all those, and then she had that tea that was so sweet it cracked your teeth, about 3 cups in it. Right, I'm digging it. I know she probably makes it that way. And so, anyways, that was my nanny. No, this ain't my nanny, the one who's yelling and fighting, and then my mama told me it's a UTI. It affects the way that she's thinking. We got to get her treated, and then she was fine. Back to the sweet nanny. Well, that's exactly what was going on here, except Saul can't blame any viral infection. He has an infected spirit. And what we begin to see happen in him is he begins to spiral. As Satan begins to have his way in Saul's life. And here's the truth, y'all. We looked at David, we see positive. Now we look at Saul, we see this. What does Satan do for you? He makes you have worry and doubts. He makes you paranoid. He tells you lies because he is a liar and he's the father of lies. He loves to share those things. He loves to sow those seeds in your brain. He loves to make you think that everybody around you right now is talking about you and they don't like you and all they ever do is harm for you and nobody cares for you. Nobody's got your back. And those bunch of dumb people, I don't have any use for them anyways. They're all mean to me. And the thing is, none of it's true. But Satan loves to do that. That's the way he works. He loves to get in our heads and make us feel that way. He wants you to doubt your salvation. He wants you to think the worst of others. He wants you to constantly have a chip on your shoulder, thinking, like I said, that people are talking about you. He can guide you to have irrational fears. But here's the thing. He really just wants you to keep you from being faithful, and he wants to keep you distracted. So that's what he brings. He brings us irrational fears. But not only that, he brings injustice. You've seen the trial of the priest. Saul begins to try the priest, and the priest has great answers. First, we didn't really harp on it, but at the very beginning, David tells what all intents and purposes is a lie. I'm here because the king sent me on a special mission. And so give me some brewed food and a weapon. And for all intents and purposes, the priest could believe it. And then the priest tells Saul, isn't David your son-in-law? Isn't David one of your commanders? Isn't David one of your greatest servants? Haven't I blessed David numerous times before? This ain't like the first time I've done this. This is nothing special, Saul. And then he goes on to say, if y'all had a problem, I promise I didn't know anything about it. And yet, all of those very valid points led Saul to say, oh, that's worth considering. No, he said, kill him. Kill him. And the priest, who had done nothing wrong, actually done the opposite, done everything right, was put to death. And nobody would do it but the Edomite. This was a mock trial. And the thing is, it reminds me, once again, of a mock trial that our Lord underwent right before his crucifixion. See, the prince of this world shows his face all the time. We live in a world that's full of injustice. The evil prosper and the righteous are killed. The psalmist dealt with it, y'all. So if you look at our world and think, golly, what's the Lord up to? Why is things this bad? Go read the Psalms. He says it all the time. He says, why is it that the rich get fat and prosper and they're fine, and the righteous one is slain or trampled upon? He says, why does this happen? What's going on in this world that this is the case? But the reality is it's all about the fact that the prince of this world brings pain, he brings lies, and all he wants is condemnation. Ultimately, we know that God sees it all. He's going to be the ultimate judge. But if we wonder why it happens now, it's just because it's the way of evil. See, with him we see injustice, and the fact is that all Satan has for us is condemnation. He may tell you otherwise. He may give you evil, empty promises. And when the rubber meets the road, he really doesn't care about your plans or your thoughts. He just brings pain and condemnation. He's the one that's opposed to the God of perfect. We have to be careful which one we're following. And then finally with Saul, we see insidious plans. You see what happened with the story? It takes an even more harsh turn. Saul kills the priests, and then he orders a massacre. It says 85 priests were killed, and then all the women and the infants and the animals were all slaughtered, put to the sword. All because of one man's paranoia and insecurity. A wicked man. He may have seemed good to begin with. If you remember in 1 Samuel, as Saul becomes the first king, and he stands and says a foot taller than everybody else, and he seems like this great character. But we begin to slowly see a fade in Saul as he truly begins to make its way out. Who he is truly begins to make its way out. And here we begin to see it at its worst. This type of event that we see is evil in action. You know, oftentimes, we were joking a couple Sunday nights ago about WebMD. You know how you Google stuff on WebMD, and no matter what, you got cancer, right? That's what it says. Right? You can have stumped your toe. It's like, might be cancer. It comes up every time, and so it's probably dangerous to go to WebMD, but it's also something we all do, and sometimes it actually finds stuff, right? And so it can be good. So Google away, just don't get too worried about it, because if it gives you 4 options and one of them is cancer, consider the other 4 options first, right? Don't jump to the worst. But that being said, we go on there and we get really concerned about everything else, and that's what happens. But the thing is, it's good to know those symptoms, because when it comes to things like cancer or any illness, really, the best thing to always do is catch it early. Right? But sometimes, with particularly bad illnesses, you don't begin to see any of the effects until it's too late. The fact is, who Saul was, is who he always was. Yeah, the Spirit of God had left him. He began to get crazier and crazier in these last few chapters. But the reality is, who he was in his heart, this built-up pride. He was always fighting for his own kingdom. He didn't really care about God. He didn't really care about Samuel. He was building stuff for himself. All of that begins to show the truth of who he is. And now when we see, is this really the guy we made king? The guy who would have all these priests slaughtered? The fact is, it always was. He's pointing forward to something that's completely against Christ. And now you see where we say, Saul the Antichrist. As we see David, the one who accepts the rejects, the one who gives rescue and rest, the one who is there no matter what. Right? Who cares about you over in your religion? With Saul, irrational fears, injustice, evil plans, death, condemnation. 2 very different things. So, in these 2 chapters, you see that comparison. I think, since we've been bouncing back and forth to the New Testament, there's 2 ideas in the New Testament that come down to the same point. Paul and Peter and all of the apostles, especially after the resurrection, would preach. I was thinking specifically of Peter after the resurrection at Pentecost. He stands up and he begins to preach Christ to everybody. He says, the one who you crucified, he was the Messiah, the Son of God. And at the very end of that, he says, repent and receive Jesus. So in the New Testament, we're called to receive Christ. But later, Paul teaches and says, resist the evil. The problem, y'all, is when we get that backwards. We live in a world sometimes it's fine receiving the evil as long as they resist Christ. Let's make it right.